You've made a career in healthcare. You may be a nurse, doctor, researcher, clinician, or scientist. But every day you're making an incredible contribution to society by just doing your job. Healthcare has always been about improving outcomes, and advances made often come from those at the front line. From professionals who ask, what if, why not, and can it be done better? Slowly, new ideas come into practice, building on knowledge often through clinical trials and development. The National Health Innovation Centre Singapore, or NHIC, is also here to make a difference. The center supports the development of innovative technologies and services to improve healthcare delivery and patient care. NHIC funding aims to expedite the translation of an innovation into a market-ready product. This helps to expand the resources available for more vital cutting-edge research. More importantly, new health innovations help people to live longer and better lives. Here are just a few innovations that NHIC has supported. Technology that aims to prevent muscle loss and stimulate physical activity when such activity isn't possible, for example, during an injury. Artificial intelligence is being used to quickly and accurately detect potential threats of vision loss in diabetic patients and other eye diseases threatening sight. Preclinical development of umbilical cord blood grafts. This impressive stem cell innovation is intended to treat a range of blood-bone marrow disorders in a more safe manner. With cardiovascular disease rising, a project to develop different types of heart valves, improving vastly on current standards, improving outcomes and decreasing complications at less cost. If your health innovation is close to being ready for market, NHIC is here to support your commercialization efforts. In addition to funding, NHIC acts as a catalyst, promoting collaborations, bringing the right partners together to support your innovation. NHIC is your commercialization partner across a range of different stages, including fulfilling stringent regulatory obligations, and NHIC's combined expertise and resources support health innovations along the commercialization journey. Give your healthcare idea, innovation, or invention the best chance of success with the National Health Innovation Centre, Singapore.
Hello to all Switch participants. Such virtual events are something we are all getting used to, as the pandemic forces us to remain physically distant. In fact, this pandemic demonstrates the urgent need for healthcare innovation, and we must continue to innovate and develop improved biotechnologies, medical devices, and healthcare services. This is precisely why NHIC was established. We provide translational funding to the Singapore's public clinical research sector to accelerate the commercialization of healthcare innovation towards a market-ready product. And since 2014, we have supported over 100 healthcare technologies. Some of these projects are successful in the form of out-licensing to industry partners or spinning off a startup company to commercialize technology. We are proud to have funded these projects, which are now resulting in better quality of healthcare for patients. However, more than just funding, NHIC also provides strategic guidance to help healthcare innovators and entrepreneurs. Although they are industry experts in their particular fields, they need business guidance to bring their innovations from bench to the bedside. This is why today's MOU for learning between NHIC and PwC Singapore is so important. By leveraging upon PwC's extensive knowledge, we aim to build up commercialization capabilities among Singapore's health tech innovators. Through activities like fireside chats, webinars, and one-to-one business clinics, NHIC-supported clinician innovators can gain latest industry trends and insights, understand how to validate their technology, learn commercialization challenges, and pick up fundraising strategies. This allows us to support each stage of the lengthy commercialization journey of health tech innovators and ventures, enabling them to grow into scalable, sustainable companies. The end goal is better healthcare delivery and patient outcomes in Singapore and globally. With this in mind, I encourage more health tech innovators and entrepreneurs to get in touch with the NHIC to explore how we can support you in your commercialization journey. Thank you.
Just to build on what Professor Tina has shared, supporting companies from bench to bedside is something we hold close to our heart at PwC Singapore Venture Hub. As a practicing clinician and innovator, over the years I've seen firsthand the challenges health tech startups face. What we strive to do at PwC is to support health tech startups all the way from conceptualization through to successful and also sustainable commercialization. And we do this by providing clinical advisory services, commercial advisory services, and even help startups get direct access to clinical trials and pilots, not just locally and regionally, but globally too. Over the years, we've seen how aligned NHIC's vision and our vision has been, and I'm thus very excited and looking forward to our knowledge partnership with NHIC from today. By working together, we're better together. And on that note, we very much look forward to our partnership going forward. Thank you.
Dear attendees, I'm Cher, the Director of National Health Innovation Center. Following the signing of our MOU with PwC Singapore, NHIC would like to bring together dialogue sessions with the key stakeholder that can help you navigate the biomedical healthcare innovation ecosystem in Singapore. We are honored to have this session moderated by our distinguished partner, Dr. Zubin Daruwalla from PwC Singapore. Today, we are excited to have panelists from Consortium for Clinical Research and Innovation Singapore, Singapore Health Services, National Healthcare Group, National University Health System, Experimental Drug Development Center of A*STAR, and Singapore Biodesign Program. We hope you will enjoy key insights from these sessions that will help you in your commercialization journey.
Thank you for inviting me for this session. So just by way of introduction, I'm Danny Soon. I'm the CEO of the newly formed entity called CRIS. It stands for the Consortium for Clinical Research and Innovation Singapore. And we are new and set up literally in April of this year. And the reason for the creation of CRIS is for us to bring together under a single platform 5 very exciting research platforms and programs. Right. So the 5 platforms and programs are the SCRI, which is the Singapore Clinical Research Institute, the NHIC, which is the National Health Innovation Center, a cell therapy unit called ACTRIS, a precision medicine program called PRECISE, and also the Singapore Translational Cancer Consortium, or STCC. So, as you know, over the last decades, Singapore has been investing significantly in the biomedical life sciences field, right? And in the area of innovation, particularly, we've managed to grow some pretty impressive platforms and programs. And so these programs having grown over the years and matured, a decision was made to bring them together under a single entity so that we can bring forward good operational efficiencies, bring together a sense of cohesiveness and unity of purpose, and also then to foster synergies and capabilities right across the ecosystem. Okay, and so with this, we look forward to the future in terms of building out programs in clinical research, in medtech support and funding, in cell therapies, in precision medicine, as well as in cancer research. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Danny, while I understand that CRIS was established earlier this year, and while there are 5 entities within your remit, as you mentioned, NHIC, SCRI, ACTRIS, PRECISE, and STCC, how do you foresee CRIS playing a role across our healthcare innovation ecosystem?
Right. So, as you know, healthcare innovation, is is dependent on a number of things in a whole long value chain, right? So you have obviously the investments in the basic science research, then you get through into the early translational spaces, and then you get into the more the aspects of innovation, of productization and so forth, and then commercialization. And so where CRIS and entities of CRIS play would be right in the middle of that, right? So where we are looking to bring basic research that is becoming more mature. They're getting into, in the case of drug development, for example, we're getting into validated targets, we're getting into early molecules. In the case of medtech, there'll be efforts to file for IP, there'll be efforts to try to turn the ideas into early prototypes. And then in the case of some of the other programs like cell therapy, like in precision medicine, they will be trying to build platforms that are enablers, right? So for example, in the cell therapy program, CRIS, there will be a build out of a facility that will help investigators with early ideas and potentially some early assets do the work in terms of scale up, in terms of characterization, and then in terms of turning it into GMP products that can be put back into patients, right? So that kind of enabling capability will be critical, right, as we go forwards in terms of
Absolutely.
turning the science of healthcare discovery, basic life science discovery into actual innovation. Yeah.
So essentially, I guess when we talk about bench to bedside, you guys play somewhere in the middle of that journey.
That's absolutely right. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess my next question really is, given the biggest trends we're seeing across the globe when it comes to the health industries, we call them the ABCDs, artificial intelligence and intelligent automation, big data, consumerism, and digital. With big data only recently garnering a lot of attention, do you feel that CRIS will expand to include some of these trends as a new standalone unit, perhaps?
Right. So at this point, that is not something that's under consideration. As you rightly alluded to, big data and the analytics behind it certainly are of huge potential right now, and already they're beginning to deliver some real impact, right? And we I guess in one way, and currently that's I suppose in some areas it's viewed that way. It is a horizontal which supports multiple types of activities, be it in imaging, be it in drug discovery. I just read about the AI program that could predict protein folding, right? Just on the amino acid sequence. So those are sort of important breakthroughs that are critical. And as a capability that supports each of these domains, and I think to my understanding is that even though you use the word big data and analytics in a fairly, we can use it in a fairly generic form. In each of these domains, they connote different types of activities. So I think at this point, to bring it under a single entity is likely challenging, perhaps, and not thinking about it in those terms. However, for some of our platforms, they are actually, of course, users of big data approaches. Like for instance, in precision medicine, then clearly there, in terms of the size of the cohorts, the amount of genetic information that's being looked into, then the linking up to things like health data and so forth. That will require big data approaches.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I guess what you're saying is really, and you're absolutely right. If we look at big data, it's more encompassing of the different units that you have, rather than be a standalone, because it cuts across all, which is absolutely what we're seeing in the industry. So then I guess my question is, across the various organizations, you'd be looking to work with people in the public and private side who can provide that data support, because what we're seeing is so many of these new, whether it's startups or even the big corporates, providing really strong data capabilities. Is that how you see it progressing, that in some form of partnership and collaboration to address the data side of things?
Right. So I think the answer is that it does depend. I think for the in the case of the precision medicine program, we work with partners all through that value chain. Those that are involved, for example, in terms of gene sequencing, those that are involved in data analytics, and also the end users of that data. Because, in a way, we partner, but we also a provider, right? We will be, through the precision medicine program, we'll be looking to aggregate information, looking to do the analytics, which we will do with in partnerships. But then thereafter, once this is synthesized and you've got, sort of like information that's tied up that is useful, then how that data, would be, I would say, shared, right? In collaboration with downstream users, for example, pharma companies, biotechs, even healthcare providers, right? To help to, I guess, drive discovery, to drive therapeutics development, or even better healthcare, right, for patients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are multiple bodies, right? Whether it's the World Bank, WHO, even the non-traditional players in health are very keen to look at this data for various purposes. Okay, great, great. I guess moving on, when we talk about public-private partnerships or PPPs, right? With the value that public-private partnerships bring, do you feel there is a role for growing the consortium to include a number of other stakeholders from both the public as well as private sectors? And how do you really see CRIS playing a role in advocating PPPs?
Sure. So, I mean, where CRIS sits certainly is will be one of the places where the interface between the public sector and private sector occurs, right? Because we are in the business of providing from the public side funding, right, to set up core capabilities and core infrastructure and talent in these spaces that we described earlier, where CRIS is involved in. And with this, then obviously to take it on to the next level where you're looking at deployment, you're looking at real world usability of this capabilities, then that's where private sector plays a very, very significant role, because those are the entities that will be patient or customer facing. They're the ones who understand the market. They're the ones that got access to additional funding. Because once you go into product development, then that becomes a space which does get expensive quickly, and there's a high level of risk. And those are things which are better, I would say, done within the private sector rather than the public sector, sort of taking big bets on therapeutics development, for example, right? Yeah. So so we are working right across the different business units. In the case of Precise, the sort of usual players in the diagnostic space, those that are doing sequencing and so forth, the pharma companies. In the case of Actris, it will be entities that are involved in developing new cellular therapies. You'll be the equipment makers who are interested in developing new analytics, new sort of cell expansion systems, things like that. Those will be the private partners that we'll bring in as we develop these platforms.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Danny. I guess one of my last questions, if I think about it, maybe would love to hear a little bit about your view on something. Could you share your view on just generally the trends and challenges ahead for the therapeutics and biopharmaceutical development with respect to Singapore specifically?
Right. So I think some bright spots and maybe some clouds on the horizon. I think so speaking in Singapore perspective, obviously. So in terms of where Singapore is, we are very well placed, I feel, with regards to know-how, with regards to talent, right? So because there's been a long-standing investment in this space over the last few decades, at least, the last couple of decades. So the core life science talent in the early research space is, I think, very strong. The know-how a little bit downstream of that has also grown significantly over the last couple of decades, and that, I think, is a result of some of the governmental and EDB investments in pharma R&D units in Singapore, right? This is from 2000 onwards for about a decade or so.
Absolutely.
And so that investment has seeded capability and know-how and talent, right? And the interesting thing is, since that point, the growth is now looks to be, at least part of it is now being driven by indigenous biotech startup companies, Okay, so this is where now going to the next phase is not so much depending solely on the foreign MNCs to drive the sector, but rather to have the ability of the local talent, the local, I would say, investors to come in and actually start building those companies in Singapore. And so that's where we are. So I think that's a bright spot for us in Singapore. That the local effort has taken root and is growing. I think where it's maybe more, where I would say maybe some clouds would be that there will be competitors on the landscape. So obviously the rest of Asia is not set still. If you're looking at places like China, Korea and so forth, they have got, they've grown their sectors very significantly also, and they've got the scale, right, which Singapore, I think, to some extent struggles with. So, if I would say the two things would be that we've got a good local effort going. I guess the clouds being that, the competitors aren't sitting still. Yeah.
Agree. I think, to summarize, we're a tiny little red dot, but I think we have such a big, big impact, not just locally, but regionally and globally. Well, listen, thank you, Danny, for your time. Really appreciate it. Hope everyone has found some of these insights that Danny has shared useful. Again, thanks for your time and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Chen and I am Group Director for Organizational Transformation in SingHealth. Very happy to share a little bit about SingHealth with you. SingHealth is the largest public healthcare cluster in Singapore. There are three, and SingHealth is the largest, accounting for about 4.3 million outpatient visits a year. And we are proud that we account for about half of all A&E and inpatient care in the public healthcare sector. We do provide a full continuum of care, ranging from primary care to secondary and quaternary care. We have 4 acute hospitals under our charge, including the Singapore General Hospital, Changi General Hospital, KK Women and Children's Hospital, Sengkang General Hospital, as well as a number of national specialty centers. So that's where the quaternary care is. We have National Cancer Center, National Heart Center, Singapore National Eye Center, National Dental Center, and the National Neuroscience Institute. In terms of continuing care, we have the SingHealth Community Hospitals, Bright Vision, Outram, and Sengkang are 3 separate community hospitals which come under the group. And I think what's important for SingHealth is that we work together as a cluster to try and advance care, and we work very closely with other clusters and with our parent Ministry of Health as well. So we have been grateful to all our partners and also the various innovators in SingHealth that we have successfully deployed quite a number of innovation projects during COVID, and I just thought I'd share a little bit with you. You may have heard about some of these via the media. SwabBot, of course, is this robotic nasal pharyngeal swabbing system. Dr. COVID was deployed to good effect in our CCF facilities, that's a community care facilities at Expo, very large exhibition center, which was converted for thousands of positive patients, as well as also for our community hospital. It was also used in a community hospital and also in, believe it or not, a resort where we had quarantined positive patients who were displaying very mild symptoms. So this is a multilingual AI-based system for COVID-19 surveillance. We also developed SG Safe swabbing booth. This is again something that, similar to many of the other innovations, has been developed in conjunction with industry as well as various collaborators. SG Shield is an intubation shield, which gives healthcare workers added protection. And there's a PPE vending machine with automated inventory fulfillment. SG Spark is a portable system that converts wards, ICUs, and operating theaters into negative pressure isolation rooms within hours. And of course, this presents potential for significant time savings, as well as cost savings, because we all know that if you have to build from scratch, from day one, to provide for these negative pressure ISO rooms right from the start. Each of these are extremely expensive, but allowing for that very flexible conversion is potentially a savings for the health system. We have been working very closely with industry as well as various government agencies such as Enterprise Singapore, where we bring together innovators and companies to develop impactful solutions. We put out problem statements from all different innovators across the entire cluster, and also across different professional groups, whether it's nurses, allied health professionals, doctors, and even administrators. So we have had just for this year, as a taste of what we do, events on product design, mixed reality, AR, VR, and AI in healthcare. We have many other multidisciplinary innovation clinics and other ways in which we build that innovation problem statement pipeline. We do collaborate with our ecosystem partners to spin off new ventures, and here are some examples of those. You may have heard about them, whether it's various solutions for safe using of digital devices, or whether it's automated image analysis for diabetic retinopathy, or ultrasound guided spinal landmark identification, and so on. And next year, we are looking forward to an innovation center. This is going to be a physical facility that will be a one-stop shop for external parties to interact with SingHealth innovators. It will be a critical new capability for the SingHealth landscape, because we are going to bring our innovators to a place, both virtually as well as physically, where they can get extra assistance, and of course, partner with various strategic partners. I think these all exist already, but they have been somewhat disparate in the past, and there are various pockets of expertise and resources across the cluster, and this is going to be a place where we help people to navigate a bit better. And we do welcome more collaborators and partners to work with us going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chani, for that presentation. Very well articulated in terms of what SingHealth does and what you all are looking to do in the innovation space. So maybe I can start by a question. Could you maybe perhaps share the key reason for your organization to actually have created a cluster level office that focuses on innovation?
Thanks, Zubin. I think innovation has always been a very critical part of SingHealth's mission. And in fact, innovate to advance is in our mission statement. But I think with in the past couple of years, there's been a recognition that downstream innovation, not just the upstream innovation that happens with research, has taken on and added importance. And I think there's a groundswell of interest in innovation, great participation in innovation. And I think we also see this as part of our strategic capabilities for us to continue to move ahead with the times, to serve our patients better, to provide better care, and give better value to our patients. And it's also part of our national mission to continue to innovate and do so in a way that makes sense and is sustainable for the healthcare system. So this was why we set up a cluster level office focusing on innovation middle of last year. And along with that, there have been other attendant changes. So for instance, this year we have focused on really bringing together all the different officers doing innovation across the different institutions in the cluster. And there are many institutions in the cluster, as I've mentioned. We are establishing an academic medicine innovation institute, which brings together the various innovation entities and leads across SingHealth and NUHS as part of this academic medical center. And we also have various platforms where innovation leads across different domains, such as nursing, allied health, etc. And the different institutions can come together to share and synergize. And that's been very powerful and very useful for us to move this ahead. And going forward, we are going to push this even more.
Great to hear, Chenny. I think what you say resonates very well with me. I'm glad to hear what you've described as, I guess, a very collaborative ecosystem that you're building. And I suppose one thing that we've seen not just locally and regionally, but globally as well, is that whole success from bench to bedside. And so it's great and refreshing to hear that. So congratulations on setting all this up.
If I may add, Zubin, it's collaboration is a very important thing. Cross-learning is very important. But in addition, specifically for innovation and commercialization, one thing we want to push in our cluster is adoption and scaling. So having that power of a cluster, which is large, and which accounts for about half of the public healthcare sector, as I shared just now, is something that we think is a strength that should be tapped. So if there is an innovation developed for one institution or piloted at one institution, it ought to scale if it makes sense. And that's what we are trying to do as well.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. I think when we see what's in the market and talk to startups and SMEs in the health tech space, clinical adoption is probably one of the biggest pain points, one of the biggest challenges. So I think you hit the nail on the head when you say you're addressing that pain point as well as many others. So thank you for that. If I could just ask you then another question, and maybe this is coming from my wearing my hat as a practicing clinician. So, practice-changing solutions often face resistance by incumbents. I often say in my capacity as a practicing clinician that we need to use technology to really complement our clinical practices rather than replace them. So my question to you is, in your opinion, what is the approach organizations like yours need to take in order to encourage this innovation and transform current clinical practices?
You are absolutely right. And I think it comes with the approach, right? What is the approach that we take in dealing with various innovations? And I do believe that key to this is having our healthcare professionals be the ones to own the problem and be part of the solution. It cannot be something which is imposed from outside and given or mandated for people to adopt. That will never work. There are intricacies to processes which are important to take into account. Processes need to be rethought. It's never about a device or technology per se. Sometimes maybe there are steps which don't need to exist at all. And I think that is critical. Having healthcare professionals be part of scoping out the problem, part of coming up with a solution is absolutely critical. And I'll give you two examples. One example is what we call the nursing software suite. This is something that came out as part of our working with patients, with staff, and realizing that patients and their caregivers would love to have better real-time understanding of what was going on for them in the wards while during an inpatient stay. So say, for instance, what time they were going to go for a scan, what time they were going to go for a surgery, what kind of medications they were on, diagnosis, even things like certain things that could help nurses and our caregivers that they could do themselves. Whether it's intake, output, monitoring, and so on. So lots of different things. And these came out from the nurses, which we subsequently partnered with companies to develop. And it's been piloted now in 4 of our hospitals. And it's gradually being refined. We are in version 3, and we saw it used to good effect during COVID as well, with very good feedback from our patients. And I think the key to scaling it has been that it's the people who are doing the process redesign. So teams such as my team, other teams, as well as the nurses really owning this, working in tandem with IT and with external companies, that's going to work. But if it is just a product that comes in with no concern for the processes and without the ability to iterate very rapidly, that's not going to work. And then another example I would cite is, for instance, some solutions you're working on for changing the way in which we, optimizing the way in which we do certain things in the operating theaters. So again, you know, our nurses and are fully engaged, surgeons fully engaged in this, and you know, we meet weekly with the companies. There's great and very close involvement. I think that's what you need. And when we hear from our companies, one of the gaps that they see often is that they are not hearing very close feedback. They're not there on the ground, and we need to embed them.
Absolutely right. Very, very happy to hear you share this as well, Chen. You know, in the market, just from working on this for a number of years, that is one pain point that we've constantly said as well, that there's been this gap. I don't think there's a shortage of talent. You know, we have a number of bright clinicians and allied health professionals. We have a number of bright researchers and scientists. But where the problem historically has been is that often, as you said, on the technology side and process side, people don't engage the clinicians or the allied health professionals early enough. And on the flip side, people on the healthcare provision side don't understand the technology problems and don't engage the technology side. So very happy to hear that you're kind of bringing this together. Certainly a recipe for success. So congratulations on that.
I think it's really a long journey, and we are in the process of doing it, and we very much appreciate all help and advice from everybody.
That's great. Maybe I'll just wrap things up with one last question. Could you share a little bit for the tech companies and others that are listening to this? Could you maybe share how external healthcare companies or others can actually work with your office in bringing their innovation into the healthcare system?
Thanks very much. So you're talking about test bedding innovations in the healthcare system.
Not only test bedding, but you know, hearing about the problem statements, working with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So whether it's test bedding or co-developing or even out licensing, IP, etc., we invite them to connect with us. For now, one good way to do it is to write to us at oot@singhealth.com.sg. That's Office for Organisational Transformation. So that is actually a way in which we can plug in SMEs and startups with our innovators, and also let them know about events which may be relevant to them, depending on their expertise and so on. We can bring them into networking events, etc. And we do keep a list of people on our companies on our radar, so that when there are problem statements, as and when, we do matchmake them as well. So that's one. But I would say, as I mentioned just now, we are going to start an innovation center. So once the innovation center starts, we hope that will be the one-stop shop. And I would say in SingHealth, what we also try to aspire to is that there should be no wrong door. So even if companies approach the, I guess, maybe not so relevant department, they should be able to cross-refer as well.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Chen, for sharing all this. It's been really insightful. I'm sure everyone watching and listening in has found the same. So again, thank you for your time today. I wish you all the best and the organization all the best. Have a great day. Thank you so much, Zubin.
Okay, so good day, everyone. My name is Cher Heng. I'm one of the partner leads within the NHG, National Healthcare Group Center for Medical Technologies and Innovations. And it is my pleasure to be sharing a little bit more about what we do and some of the work that we have accomplished. So the Center for MedTech and Innovations within NHG supports all the NHG entities including, as you can see here, the institutions. I think we're all very familiar with IMH Skin Center and NCID, as well as the hospitals, Tan Tock Seng, Woodlands Health, as well as Khoo Teck Puat Hospital, and some of the other units, including the polyclinics and the NHG diagnostics. The overall vision for NHG CMTI is to create that ecosystem for innovative medtech solutions that can ultimately contribute to our patients and the NHG's vision of adding years of healthy life. And we are looking at delivering outcomes across several verticals: productivity, patient and community engagement, improved healthcare, as well as smart healthcare. And in order to do that, what we do is try and engage both our clinicians and our partners to bring forth collaborations. We also seek to educate our clinicians and the staff within NHG to learn more about creativity and innovation, and finally to enable the projects along the commercialization pathway, ensuring that the concept to market journey is a smooth one. And so NHG MedTech and Innovation Center does the job of bridging the gap, fostering partnerships, as well as facilitating development. Our core functions include needs finding, connecting with our clinicians to understand their clinical problem statements, finding the right partners, either through the industry or with our academic partners, looking for joint funding or developing joint funding to support the projects, assisting our innovators through the ideation and the co-development process, helping the prototypes and products to undergo pilot testing, validation, and finally to commercialize and implement. So the whole premise of what we do is really to develop solutions that are useful and addressing unmet clinical needs. And therefore, we have developed over time a community of practice led by innovators and key opinion leaders across the clinical deliveries, platforms or verticals such as preventive health and chronic disease management, all the way across to palliative and end-of-life care. And we are looking at a whole spectrum of technology solutions, including AI analytics, bioimaging, and more interestingly, recently, food technologies. And what we try and do is to put our clinical innovators next to the technical and business experts, which are really the people in the industry, and as well as some of the research institutes like A*STAR. And what we try and do is to over time develop joint ownership of intellectual property. And of course, these will also at some point include discussion on royalty equity as well as business arrangements. But really the primary goal of what we try to do is to bring solutions out there to the market, available and accessible to our patients, and overall improving their care. So if you look at the ecosystem for NHG CMTI, it spans from industry partners to such as trend lines through the government agencies like Enterprise Singapore, EDB, the research institutes such as A*STAR, and together with them, we have formed several collaborative units like the Skin Research Institute of Singapore. And of course, our academic partners are NTU and NUHS. And much of this cannot be done without the funding support, grant funding from the NHIC, and also some of the training that is provided by Singapore Biodesign and Jumpstart. So the idea is to allow our clinicians to innovate and have access to funding at several stages of the development, particularly including the pre-concept phase, and that's where intramural funding support has been quite critical. And then subsequently, when the ideas become more formed and solutions are quite clear, they can then compete more nationally for the competitive grant funding, primarily led by Enterprise Singapore and NHIC. We also leverage on the strength of the cluster as a clinical health provider to help to validate and trial the solutions, to understand the value and the feasibility of the solutions. And over time, we are quite proud that CMTI actually is about officially about 3 years old, but we have over time already connected across and supported 83 projects. And we now have approximately 200 clinicians who are involved in one way or other in innovation projects. And then 18 of the projects have so far been commercialized and 12 spin-off companies. We have about 66 patent applications and about $28 million in industry funding. And here is some examples of some of the commercialized projects that we have, ranging from robotics, particularly for rehabilitation, to skin care, such as Subam. I think that's something that many of us are familiar with, as well as the data analytics and machine learning, trying to detect and prevent falls in patients. And as mentioned earlier, food technology to create products that help patients with swallowing difficulties. Some of the spin-off companies, in particularly, I would like to highlight our collaboration with Trendlines that has been pretty amazing. Actually, in such a short span of time, we have a whole range of companies that are now addressing very real-world clinical problems. And finally, of course, we do provide opportunities to our clinicians for collaboration, networking, and showcasing their products and their projects. So we work with Intuitive, the NHIC, Trendlines. Internally, we have our own annual scientific meeting, and then we had an open innovation challenge together with A-Star Accelerate. And we're very happy that we are currently looking at an initiative that helps to incubate some of the startup companies through at Mandalay, Collab at Mandalay. This is cited within Novena Health City, and we will provide more information as the time comes. But most importantly, I guess for this presentation, I would like to thank Switch for allowing us the opportunity to present, showcase, and this really goes a long way because it allows our clinician innovators to have opportunities to present their work and inspire others. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Heng, for that really wonderful presentation that explained things were very well articulated, actually. Maybe if I could just ask you a couple of questions. I noted that CMTI's vision is to create an ecosystem for innovative medtech solutions that can contribute to NHG's vision of adding years of healthy life by engaging, educating, and enabling, as you showed in your presentation as well. What was the reason behind it for the organization to create CMTI, actually?
Well, I think the primary reason is really to allow technology to help to improve the care of our patients. And so key to that is trying to bring the expertise, solution providers from industry and from the academia to come in and work with our clinicians who do face day-to-day clinical problems. They have unmet clinical needs for themselves and for their patients. And without these, partners with their solutions, it then becomes very hard for us to truly innovate and transform some of the care processes, or rather through the solutions that are then made available to our patients. So I would say in a nutshell, really, if I were to just say one reason, that would be to really improve the care for our patients. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I guess in terms of CMTI's achievements, they have been very impressive. That includes 83 project collaborations, correct me if I'm wrong, 18 projects commercialized and 12 spin-off companies. What would you say was the single most success factor in achieving this?
I think the most important factor would be openness for collaboration. And as I, kind of overemphasized a little bit during the presentation and earlier, the solutions cannot come in without the expertise of our partners. Yet at the same time, there must be that willingness for the clinicians to bring up the problem statements and be open to think about the problems. And very often we find that the problem at first hand may be something that is a little bit raw and requires refinement and putting through certain processes such as design thinking. And also very much so, our clinicians don't have that experience of understanding how to commercialize or even create a product. And this is where over time we found that the entire process of collaboration, that openness to listen to others, that openness to work together becomes very important for our projects to really see the light of day.
Great, thank you. Again, just reflecting on the various organizations we've been talking to today, right? Everyone comes back to this whole collaboration. I think it can't be, it cannot be overemphasized. I think true collaboration, especially between both the public and private sector, really unlocks value for all. So thank you for sharing that thought. Maybe if I just dive a little bit deeper into what I said there earlier about the 12 spin-off companies. Of these 12 spin-off companies, maybe if you could just kindly share more on which you think are the one or two most exciting ones and the impact they have achieved.
Sure. Yeah, of course, at this point, I would like to mention, highlight the collaboration that we have with Trendlines. So Trendlines is an Israeli-based company, but they really are looking for real-world problems and help to seek solutions. Together with them, our clinicians from both TTSH and Khoo Teck Puat Hospital have come up with this problem of not being able to do a lumbar puncture without image guidance. And what the company sets out to do is really to use ultrasound, which is, actually technically widely available, and trying to make it something easy for the procedurists to do. And maybe for the layman, lumbar puncture is really when we put a needle into the spine and try and take some fluid out of the spinal cord, the spinal canal rather. And often it is done blind, and it is prone to errors and complications. And the amount of accuracy can be certainly improved by using this technique. So Medalla Pro is one of the spin-off companies that we are particularly excited about. I think the other spin-off or solution that we are very excited to talk about would be the solution Articas. Articas was really spun out of a research collaboration with NTU where we looked at how we could use robotic technology to improve rehabilitation for patients. So it is now morphed into a product that can even be brought home, and the stroke patients with upper limb or upper arm weakness are able to train themselves using that robotic solution to improve their function and post stroke recovery. So these are the two examples of very good startups. And I think what importantly, they highlight not just collaboration with our industry partners, but really also the collaboration across the institutions within NHG, and also that openness for our clinicians to think about how they can use technology to improve the care for their patients.
Thank you, Chen. Thanks very much. Maybe we touch on something a little bit different. Unlike other stakeholders in our local health tech ecosystem, CMTI's focus is on med tech, meaning medical devices. So compared to other health tech solutions like technology platforms and others such as software as a medical device, which is quite hot at this point in time, the challenges when it comes, going from conceptualization to commercialization, and especially sustainable and successful commercialization for new medical devices are somewhat more complex. Do you have any thoughts on this? And in particular, any advice to our friends and colleagues out there looking to embark on what is often a long journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, our definition of health tech and med tech, digital technology have kind of over time become a little bit gray. And I say that because when we define the Center for Med Tech and Innovations, we didn't go about saying that we will not help to facilitate digital technologies. And certainly, as you know, we are in a highly regulated environment where the internet separation is necessary, where many of the cybersecurity concerns are particularly heightened after several recent events. The road to adoption and implementation for some of these digital technologies are certainly more cumbersome. And what we try to do internally within NHG is to work very closely with our IT regulators, our internal, the IT security officers, the informatics officers, because we want to make sure that whatever solutions that come out do see the adoption subsequently, and we don't want them to get stuck at the prototype phase. And I think the advice to friends and colleagues out there really is to be open to talking to various people, including the regulators and the policy makers, right from the conceptualization stage, rather than to wait for a solution to finally be ready and then realize that it cannot be adopted or implemented.
Great advice, great message. Thank you. I guess to wrap it up, maybe given the current environment with COVID, as I'm sure you and I and all our colleagues know, COVID-19 has definitely stretched our healthcare system, not just ours, regional and global healthcare systems for sure. Could you maybe share some innovation examples that were developed in your organization to alleviate the problem and how it was actually accomplished?
Sure, happy to do that. And I guess before I sound too centric on Tan Tock Seng, I just want to add a disclaimer that I'm speaking on behalf of the National Healthcare Group, but we all know that during COVID, the National Center for Infectious Diseases, or NCID, that resides in Tan Tock Seng was very much the epicenter of the management of the outbreak. And so a lot of innovation had taken place within NCID TTSH. I think operationally, one of the major innovations that actually even was publicized before COVID came into play. This is the command, control, and communication, the C3, the brain of the hospital, essentially, extracting data, analyzing it, and then helping us to make some decisions to optimize patient flow and care delivery. I think that particularly was something that became a lot more prominent because we saw the integration between the new NCID and the main hospital, and was enabled us to be able to manage our patients across the campus. The other innovation that I would like to highlight is a collaboration between one of our laboratory medicine experts, Tim Barkham, and he had actually been working with the A-Star team, DXD Hub, for a long time regarding diagnosis or point of care testing for viruses. And during SARS in 2003, they already started working. So this time they were very well prepared. Even before the outbreak really landed and exploded on our shores, they already received some of the materials from China and were able to start developing the SARS-CoV kits. So the Fortitude SARS-CoV-2 kits have actually been commercialized and been quite widely used internationally. And perhaps more locally, one of the, I would say, smaller innovations is in the realm of medical imaging, where we use AI to help to diagnose the presence of COVID pneumonia on chest x-rays. And actually it was able to help us to prioritize some of the work that is being done in the hospital so that we could deal with surges in demand. So those are several examples, all fairly local, and I would say perhaps with the opportunity to go international.
Great, thank you so much, Heng. You've been very kind with your time, and you've been very kind with the examples you've shared. So I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here today. And I wish you all the best. Have a great day.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Welcome to the Center for Innovation in Healthcare. As we walk along this corridor, we are reminded of how healthcare services started and developed as a hospital-centric way of delivering care and medical treatment. The Center for Innovation in Healthcare is here to transform the healthcare system into a patient-centric one and allows for the delivery of care beyond the walls of the hospital. As we move into the showroom, we make way for a new era of advancements in healthcare technology. The technologies we adopt will improve various parts of the patient's journey, which are the different stages of health a person can experience. It starts off with a healthy individual. In this zone, user-friendly devices and wearable sensors enable them to monitor their general health and wellness. The next zone is where individuals are feeling unwell but are not yet sick. Here, the focus is on health tech solutions that provide early detection and quick diagnosis capabilities for common chronic conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. This allows for better preventive care as well as efficient and timely triaging of patients with clinically significant conditions to the hospital for necessary intervention. Unfortunately, along the way, people fall ill and need to be hospitalized. This zone focuses on improving the quality of patient experiences in the hospital, using cutting-edge technologies to provide seamless and integrated patient care, while freeing up hospital resources. The last zone focuses on post-discharge care, where assistive rehabilitative technologies and robotics help to optimize patients' recovery and independence. At CIH, we believe in the importance of education and the power of knowledge. We organize events to give you first-hand insights from healthcare leaders and enable access to a pipeline of the latest health and medtech breakthroughs. Hosted by CIH, the Health Horizons is an exclusive community of influential individuals and organizations from the thriving innovation ecosystem in Singapore. We share a mission to accelerate effective new health innovations from idea to global impact and public good. Mingle with the community at our cozy coffee lounge, where conversations begin, friendships are forged, and ideas are born. Join our community of co-innovation partners at Hello CIH, an open and collaborative workspace for the medical and health technology ecosystem. Leave your mark here at an exclusive hub nested in a public hospital, a dynamic ecosystem of healthcare innovators, clinical users, health tech and medtech startups.
So hi everyone, I'm Rina, Head of Center for Innovation in Healthcare from the NUHS cluster. So today I will share more about what CIH is and what we do. So as we all know, the innovation cycle is a long and arduous journey, and at the heart of what CIH does, we focus only on the end goal, which is to facilitate clinical adoption for all the innovations we support for public good and global impact. And we achieve this goal by complementing other partners in the innovation ecosystem, because we acknowledge that we have limited resources, and collectively with our partners, we provide the expertise and resources to progress the innovations that we support. And thirdly, by virtue of CIH being part of the National University Health System, our differentiating factor is in the access to clinical users and patients. So we focus on our core strengths of clinical test bidding and health tech assessment studies. So CIH has various services and initiatives geared towards supporting innovators, both external and internal. So since our establishment, we have supported numerous local and overseas startups, as well as our own NUHS innovators. And largely our initiatives fall into two areas. One is to build a vibrant co-innovation community with our partners. And second, to increase the value of our innovations through generating clinical evidence. So I will dive into our first area of initiative. So CIH runs our Anchor Innovation 360 events twice a year. At each event, we have 3 to 4 companies or innovation teams that are invited to pitch. And prior to the event, we sit down with our innovators to thoroughly understand their needs and matchmake the audience accordingly. And the audience can be from any of the following group of people who are key to progress their innovations. They can be business and engineering mentors, prototyping experts, regulatory, as well as investors. And after the event, this is where the real work begins. CRH will follow up on the interest generated and continue to project manage the collaboration. And we have built a vibrant co-innovation community space in the Alexandra campus where innovators can mingle with our clinical users, partners, as well as our Health Horizons community who can provide mentorship to the innovators as well. And besides this, CRH emphasized a great deal on talent development. We have been mentoring the past batches of medical students who are in fact driving their own innovations. And Dr. Chuan Hao, here, he was a medical student and now a house officer. He has even spun off a company. And every year we select a NUHS team to award funding by our donor Lotus Foundation to support the development of the innovations. Right. Just wanted to highlight our partnership with Area Institute that was announced last month in the news. We will be setting up a 50 million venture capital fund and a commercialization program for startups and spin-offs that require funding for commercialization and adoption of their innovations. And this is one of our many initiatives that are geared towards supporting the innovation ecosystem in Singapore. Right. So next, I will share more about CRH core services in the clinical test bedding and HTA studies. So CRH formally coordinates our usability trial sessions where we bring together companies and relevant clinical users. And at the session, typically the companies will start the session by sharing about their technology. And then thereafter with the clinical users, the team will do a deep dive to provide feedback and clinical insights about the innovation and about how the innovation can eventually be adopted into the hospitals and clinics. And CRH will continue to project manage if there's a clinical champion identified for the innovation team or company after this. For clinical studies, our team has the expertise to support the initiation of clinical trials, including ethics board approval, submission, contracts management, project scoping, and etc. And we also have our in-house clinical research coordinators and project managers to conduct the clinical trial itself. And the third piece is the health technology assessment part. This is really a crucial component as we drive innovations to look at in HTA studies, we look at the cost effectiveness of introducing innovation into the healthcare system. And we work very closely with the innovators to design and conduct HTA studies for their innovations. Our health economist, Prof. Joanne Yong, and her startup is seated here with us. And so we work very closely together to help our innovators with HTA studies. And also we have at NUHS formalized a process to extract relevant anonymized patient and financial data to conduct these studies. Right, so all in all, the various services and initiatives at CRH are all geared towards the only goal of getting the innovations that we support to clinical adoption. And we are also working very closely with the NUHS stakeholders to overcome hurdles to clinically adopt innovations. Right, so I'll leave you with our last slide. This is our contact, and I'll see you on social media. Thanks.
Thank you, Rina. Maybe I can just ask a question to you to get things started. Given the current pandemic situation globally, COVID-19 has stretched, as we all know, the healthcare system, not just locally, but regionally and globally as well. In your organization, what were some of the exciting innovations that you came across during this COVID-19 period?
Yeah, so we saw a variety. So particularly in Singapore, there were many robotics companies that came to us. So their original expertise is in robotics. So they reposition actually their expertise in robotics to build UV robots, right? So robots that can move autonomously in a hospital and really help to alleviate the manpower in a hospital. So that's one area, right? There are some others, like for example, wireless vital signs monitoring devices. So we saw one that came from Hong Kong. It's a Hong Kong startup. Their original business was their target customers were in sleep apnea patients. But they came to us saying that, hey, they have this vital signs monitoring that we can actually help monitor our foreign workers in the dorms.
Okay,
interesting. So it's really interesting. So other than that, we had, temperature screeners, facial recognition, telepresence robots, and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. That's actually interesting. In the market, we too are seeing a lot of technologies and solutions kind of pivot themselves to be more COVID related for the time being. So interesting to see. Okay, thank you. Lawrence, if I could ask you a question as well, please. Over the years, you have shared with me CIH's vision and purpose. Listening to Rina, it's great to hear that that is still the focus. I think what has impressed me is the laser sharp focus CIH has continued to have, in that you guys have remained clear in the value you hope to bring with a single area of focus, having been and continuing to remain the idea of supporting health tech startups and other innovative companies with clinical adoption, which I think is one of the biggest problems that we see. So I guess I'd like to ask, will this continue to be CIH's key value proposition? And also, how and why did you as an organization decide on this?
Yes, I think to answer your first question, indeed, I think clinical adoption will remain CIH only goal. We haven't changed since the inception. Okay. And the reason for that is because we feel that, I think this is a missing gap, as you rightly mentioned. And because this is a missing gap, and NUHS is in a good position to try to address this gap. And that's why we think that our value is greatest in this particular area. Okay. And moving forward, indeed, NUHS has also decided that this we call the deployment of innovation. Okay, the NUHS has decided that the deployment of what we call practice-changing innovation will be one of the key goals in the next 5 years in terms of differentiating NUHS as an academic health system. So the organization is intent to say that we should move beyond just academic achievements.
Absolutely.
Really, I think transforming as well as improving care delivery to the entire population and beyond NUHS as well.
Thanks, Lawrence. I really like that term, practice-changing innovation. I think that summarizes it very well, and certainly something that we should all strive towards. If I could actually ask you something that's related to that, Rina touched on this during the presentation there. Recently, at the end of October, an MOU and launch of a $50 million fund between NUHS and ARIA was announced. Rina spoke a little bit about it. Could you maybe share a little more on this, and perhaps even what actually led to the inking of the relationship and initiative? Was it actually part of that clinical adoption problem, or was it other factors as well that led to it?
Yes, so this is indeed a relationship that's born out of need. There was an unmet need, because we think that our core skill and core strength is actually in clinical adoption. Whereas ARIA's core strength or asset is in terms of venture building. So I think by marrying these two people, I think these two partners together, we could then do things that I think we could not do otherwise as separate entities. So I think, in other words, what we are trying to forge is a relationship of 0 + 0 = 2. So I think by coming together now, I think we can do, for instance, for CIH, we can now help a lot more innovators to spin off their products. And then finally, obviously, I think to achieve the end goal of clinical adoption through venture building, through, I think, knowledge and funding and so forth.
Okay, thank you. You know, Lawrence, a lot of what you say resonates with me. Every time I speak to you, you are really someone I would call a true clinician innovator, and are very well respected by our health tech community and broader health ecosystem. As a clinician innovator, if you could share just one piece of advice to all our health tech startups out there, what would that one piece of advice be?
I'll say that I think, having traveled the journey from the beginning, more than about 15 years ago to the current status, I think I've learned a lot. And the most important lesson for, I think, beginners, as well as those who are going through the journey now, is to be truly committed. We must believe in this angle of trying to in some way deploy innovation in order to help, I think either in terms of public good or in terms of global impact. I think the commitment is essential because I think innovation is very unlike other sort of so-called research and development. We understand that innovation has no value in the eyes of the users until such a time when it can actually prove itself to be valuable. So I think now you have to, as an innovator, you have to take this zero value product for something like 10 years. Unless you're truly committed, I think very few people will want to do that. Okay, it's almost as if I think you are trying to raise a child from year zero, the time the child is born to the time the child can actually go to school and so forth. So I think it's a very, very tough and committed, I think, until the child can actually eventually contribute back to society. And this is what an innovator should be doing.
Absolutely, fair enough. I might joke and say maybe till that child can actually get married and work as well to take it a bit further. But coming back, I guess what you said links back again. Unless there's that clinical adoption and use, what really is the value, right? So I like that 0 + 0 is 2. Maybe one last question for you, Lawrence. You know, over the last 2 years, CIH has hosted a number of pitching events supporting promising ideas from young students from the NUHS Medical School. Could you highlight some important traits that a young innovator should possess, and what are the pitfalls that they should avoid, apart from being committed? Essentially, what resources are available within CIH to bring innovative solutions to commercialization?
I think we have been helping the medical students after the sort of their competition, so-called the Medical Grand Challenge. I think these medical students, I think the chief strength with these students, the young innovators, is that they have a lot of passion, and they also have a lot of ideas, which are not confined by baggage. For instance, I think once you're established, you tend to be locked into certain mindset, into your own kind of so-called your own ideas. But these students really look at the needs. What they are lacking is obviously the sort of experience to take it all the way to adoption. And this is why I think CIH is there to help those, especially those with certain passion, I think, and also has demonstrated enough perseverance, what we call the 2 Ps. I think what we need is the third P, which we give to them, which is patronage. I think we offer them some sort of help and support and then backbone so that they can then take their own dream and idea all the way to finally, I think, fruition.
Okay, thank you. I guess this is a nice segue. I might ask Shuan a question that relates to this on the clinician side. Shuan, thanks for joining us today as well. How does the Innovation Transfer Office, or ITO, support clinicians throughout this innovation journey?
Thanks, Zubin. As you rightly pointed out, it really is a journey. I liken it somewhat to like an F1 race, right? And the ITO, the Innovation Transfer Office, we provide the pit stops. You know, we meet up, for example, with the projects in our portfolio on a quarterly, sometimes if it's very active, on a weekly basis, right? We tighten the nuts and bolts, we lubricate, we try to find out where they're stuck. Is it a DSRB issue? Is it, you know, some kind of data sharing issue? We put together all the necessary paperwork and things like that. And for one clinician who had left the system earlier, when we got in touch with him about some legacy issue, he said, oh, it's so great that you guys are here to help the clinicians, because when he was going through it, he said it was such a lonely journey. So we're kind of that pit stop. I see us as that.
I like that analogy. So I guess what would your advice be then to companies or individuals seeking to embark on specifically the licensing process with NUHS? What are the kind of things that they should look out for?
Yeah, so a licensing sort of deal really is one of many steps in what we see as a long-term relationship, right? So in order for a long-term relationship to work out, we really need to know where they want to get to and how we can then be a partner on that journey. And then it's also helps us to structure the deal in a way that can be win-win. And obviously, win-win is not going to be 50-50 throughout that journey, right? Sometimes we win some, a little bit more, sometimes you win some. Yeah.
Great, fair enough. I suppose in your experience then, if I could ask you, what would be some of the challenges you faced or the organization has faced during the tech transfer process, for example?
Yeah, so oftentimes companies come to us and they want to win the bigger portion of the pie all the time, right? So for example, I think that's a very short-term view, right? Like I said, I really do think it's a long-term relationship because licensing, from the time we license it out to you, there's product development, there's testing, there may be going back to the drawing board. Things would change, right? So if we know ultimately where you want to get to, we can even help you pivot. We can even renegotiate the licensing terms to help you over some hurdles. So I think it's to not have that short-term mindset and not to bargain on everything. You know, I always tell our companies, we're not selling fish. And if you're going to try to bargain down my upfront licensing fee, it gives me no confidence that you understand how long and expensive this process is.
Sure. I guess that also stems from a lot of these companies perhaps requiring a little more support and having a little bit more experience because they're quite new to the game. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and to be honest, having to negotiate with multiple parties, often a lot of IP has multiple stakeholders. It can get very, very long drawn. So I think communication with the right parties at the right time would help to tighten the whole process.
Okay, great. I guess one final question for you, Shuan. Moving ahead, looking into the future, can you maybe share what you think are going to be some of the upcoming innovations within the healthcare system in Singapore?
Yeah, so in line with what Lawrence and Rena shared, right, it's very much needs driven. So I call it the pull rather than a technology push. So I suspect there will be a lot of these multi-hyphenate type innovations. For example, robotics. The robot cannot just do one function, right? The robot has to maybe function as the green eye at night, you know, helping us to survey the patients, and then in the daytime completing the last mile requirements for delivery, maybe also looking at refills of medication and such. So I think multi-hyphenate would be sort of the direction I think we're going.
Great. I think just listening to all of you, very insightful afternoon for me, certainly. Actually thinking about it, I guess it looks like it's all about the P's. PCI, nice new term that I've heard. Looking at the way Shuan says it, it's sometimes the pull rather than the push. And I guess Rena's talked about the importance of partnerships as well. So listen, thank you all very much for your time. Really insightful. I hope that the audience has gained as much as I have. Thanks again and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Singapore's investments in the biomedical sciences started almost 20 years ago. I think it has been in haste, it has been deliberate, and it's taken 2 decades for us to get to where we are today.
So Singapore has really had a wonderful evolution of the process of knowledge creation to translating that knowledge into value creation and value capture. The next challenge continues to be, how do you translate those information and knowledge and create new medicines?
When you want a new drug, when you want a blockbuster drug, you have to be the first to get there. We really need to know where to compete in and be very, very focused. EDDC, it started as Experimental Therapeutics Center about 12 years ago, at a time when there was a very clear need for a public sector translator to turn all the wonderful scientific discoveries in institutes and universities into a drug candidate.
CSR is fundamentally important because ultimately it's the means by which it supports this whole endeavor. It puts in place all of the elements that allow us to fulfill that mandate, to help take these potential ideas, potential targets, potential new medicines, and actually bring them through to the stage where we really can test them.
Hello everyone, my name is Damian. I'm Chief Executive Officer of the Experimental Drug Development Center in Singapore. I'd like to just take a few minutes just to introduce you to EDDC. So effectively, EDDC is a national platform that is working in Singapore in the ecosystem to help translate basic discovery efforts into potential therapeutics of tomorrow. In that context, we have within the Institute 140 people, of which over 45% have PhD, MD backgrounds and 40% in the biotech pharma. 90 people plus are scientists with expertise in areas such as small molecule biology, large molecule research, chemistry, biomarker, clinical development expertise. As you can see, our staff hail from a multitude of large multinational pharma as well as smaller biotechs, which is critically important in bringing that expertise to bear in helping in translating this research. What is our mission here really in Singapore? Why have we been established? We are there to bridge the drug development gap in Singapore. We do that by engaging local entities to really translate this biomedical research into drugs for commercialization. And in so doing, bridge that development gap with expertise and know-how and creative, innovative drug platforms that help in that end. We're also about attracting research investments and catalyzing the biopharma ecosystem in Singapore. We're doing that through creating a pipeline of high-quality biotherapeutic assets that attract and sustain private investments, both from within Singapore, but importantly from elsewhere, as well as encouraging the spin-off of innovative biotech companies that will enhance the emerging powerhouse that Singapore's biotech ecosystem is becoming. As I said, we are a national platform for drug discovery and development. So within that, we have expertise in end-to-end of the value chain of that. And so what we work is we collaboratively work with academic and industry partners to essentially move projects through the different stages of drug discovery, preclinical development, as well as clinical development. We have in-house a number of expertise across different disciplines, including screening, target assay, biology, and so forth. We have a regulatory expertise as well as clinical operations expertise. The fundamental aim, though, is to move projects through this value increment and ultimately develop assets that can either be out-licensed to either pharma or biotech companies within Singapore or beyond, or indeed to have these assets become the basis for a spin-out of a company. I think one of the importance of what we do here has actually been signaled by our efforts here in the COVID space. So, for example, EDC brought together partners from BII, TSH to develop a diagnostic kit against SARS-CoV, and this was done in 3 weeks from January to February as COVID was still emerging. This kit, known as Fortitude 2.0, was then further partnered with DXD Hub and led to the deployment across a number of hospitals locally and indeed globally in more than 20 countries, and still retains its status as one of the most specific and sensitive tests that there is in this diagnostic space. Beyond the diagnostic, though, we actually have been working very intensely with the Defense Science Organization, DSO, as well as with other partners such as Hummingbird, to move a monoclonal antibody from initial ideas back in March to already having executed the first in-human dosing in October this year. And that's been a critical endeavor on our half to really make available a sort of built in Singapore antibody for COVID. Beyond that, I think what we have learned for this pandemic is we need to be prepared for the future. And so in addition, we are working on a small molecule that could potentially be available to treat the next COVID-type virus that may emerge in the next number of years. So this is just an example of where EDDC has been critical at a national level to help in our fight against COVID. Beyond that, I think what's important for us all to remember is EDDC is a national platform sitting within A*STAR across a number of different other research entities. And really the key A*STAR messages are that we really are helping to transform companies locally to remain competitive in a world disrupted by COVID-19 and to create good jobs. And we've given you examples how we're doing that in our therapeutic and diagnostic arena. We're about helping to contribute to better health and social outcomes for Singaporeans, as well as really positioning Singapore as a global innovation hub. We want to attract and nurture top talent and use-inspired basic research, to have high impact R&D, and indeed to foster entrepreneurship. At the bottom of it all is that it's excellent science underpins our work and outcomes, and we are leveraging that excellent science in the ecosystem to create the drugs of tomorrow. So with that, I thank you for allowing me just to give an overview of what we're doing in EDDC.
Thank you, Damian. That was a great overview of EDDC. Maybe I can start by asking you, from a pharma perspective, strategic decisions and the bulk of the big pharma's operations often reside in Europe and the USA. So given the aim of the Singapore Therapeutics Development Review being to identify potential high-value drug discovery and development projects from the research community here in Singapore, render the right support and guidance to progress promising projects and build a sustainable pipeline of drug discovery and development projects that actually align to Singapore's strategic interests, would you say that my initial statement equates to a challenge for the STDR in achieving your aim?
No, I wouldn't, Zubin. I think actually, in a reality, pharma has evolved over a number of years now to start to source its science and potential platforms and novel drugs from disparate sources, including public entities, universities, and the like. And in that context, what we have developed here in Singapore is a really sort of dramatic increase in our knowledge and expertise in basic science in disease areas, which we are leveraging, not least of which in understanding particular Asian-type disease phenotypes. So what we're working with at the STDR is to really help facilitate some of the evolution of that science to transform it into potential new therapeutics, understanding whether there are specific aspects of novel biology of itself that is important in the context of new drugs, or understanding that there may be specific phenotypes, such as Asian phenotypes, that are amenable to treatments. And so in that sense, you know, as you said, Europe and the East, traditionally drugs tended to come from the West and then be put into the East without really appreciating whether or not there were nuances about that specific response rates and otherwise. We believe now that what we're doing in STDR and beyond that is helping to understand whether drugs can be made specifically for Asia, and indeed then, you know, whether or not we can take them from the East to the West. You probably appreciate as well that the Asian markets are really becoming a very important element in big pharma's ideas and what they're doing. China, for example, India and the like. And I think even though Singapore of itself is not a large market, what it is a center of excellence in understanding the context of that sort of translational science, the context of that unmet need in an Asian perspective, and allowing us to signal some of these critical aspects back to big pharma. So I see what we're doing not being at risk, but rather being complementary to this effort. And so the STDR is always looking, how can we ensure the potential commercialization of these assets? What will be the exit strategy that will make them potentially appealing for multinationals? And indeed, beyond the STDR, let me just then finish also by saying what we've done in EDDC is actually even gone further upstream, which is to start to have conversations with scientists in their labs, in the universities, in the research institutes, to start to get them to appreciate a little bit about what are we going to do to make this essentially appealing to either an investor or a multinational? What will be kind of the case that we will make to them that this should be something that is of interest, that is innovative, that could potentially lead to disruption in that therapeutic space beyond what's already available.
That's great to hear. I don't think I even appreciated that. Very, very happy to hear. Kind of aligns with what we're seeing in the market anyway. We always talk about cultural nuances broadly in the digital health and health tech space, but also in pharma. One big problem, as you mentioned, is the whole cultural difference. And obviously an Asian demographic, even a simple same Asian demographic in the East may not react the same as in the West. So very happy to hear that that's your focus area. Certainly see the advantages to that. Thank you. Thanks, Damian. Hui Ching, maybe I can just ask you, since the official opening of the Experimental Drug Development Center, are there any interesting, exciting initiatives or milestones that have been achieved, which you can share with us?
Yes, and I'm happy to do that. As the national platform for drug discovery and development, part of our role is to work with local entities to bridge the drug development gap. So in fact, we share the success of meeting these milestones with our partners. And some of those key milestones are the ones associated with our response to COVID-19. And Damian has already mentioned some of these in his presentation. So first, the development of the Fortitude diagnostic kit for COVID-19, which was a joint effort with the A-STAR's Bioinformatics Institute and Tan Tock Seng Hospital. And this was subsequently transferred to a national platform led by A-STAR called the Diagnostic Development Hub for Productization.
The DXD Hub.
That's right, the DXD Hub. And then there's the preclinical and clinical development of a SARS-CoV-2 neutralizing monoclonal antibody, and that's from our partnership led by DSO National Labs. And we've achieved a milestone there, as Damian mentioned, in terms of Singapore's ability to accelerate therapeutic development in times of a pandemic and to bring a therapeutic antibody into the clinic in record time. And with ETC 159, our made in Singapore cancer drug, we have achieved a new developmental milestone, which was the first patient first visit in phase 1B trial. So early this year, the first dose of ETC 159 was administered to patients in this new phase of clinical testing. So for the first time, we will be looking at efficacy in addition to assessing the safety of ETC 159 in treating different types of cancers. And the trial is now running across sites in the US, in Singapore, together with a novel diagnostic kit that was also developed in Singapore. And this kit will allow us to identify particular subgroups of colorectal cancer patients that's predicted to respond well to ETC 159. And all of these is possible because of the collaboration and the inputs of our partners, such as NUHS, Polaris, clinical investigators, and many others within Singapore and beyond. And they have already played an important role in enabling the successful completion of phase 1A trial. And now they have led us to initiate this next critical stage of ETC 159's development. And then in terms of company formation of spin-offs, we will soon be announcing our first licensing deal to create an early stage biotech company. So for us, having just done our official opening last year in June, I think this is again very exciting development and important milestone for us. Indeed. And then further upstream, EDDC together with our public research partners, we came together and we launched the Target Translation Consortium, TTC, last year. Since that time, we have already done 2 calls for proposals, and this has led to a number of new target validation projects which are now being funded. They are being worked on within the different institutions. And this has been a true collaborative effort where all the consortium partners, all the members were involved in the call. They were all involved in the review and decision process and in terms of providing feedback to researchers who applied. And as a result, we now have a number of novel, interesting new targets that the whole ecosystem is now working on. So all these have been very exciting developments and milestones that we share with our partners.
Thank you. Definitely sounds like it. In 18 months, I have to say, congratulations to EDDC. I was thinking that you might have maybe 1 or 2. This is fantastic to hear. So really a big congrats to the whole team at EDDC. Maybe I'll move on, and I guess before I do, just a comment. Speaking to so many different people, and asking different questions. One recurring theme that is coming out is this whole idea of collaboration and working between stakeholders, the public and private sector. So it's interesting. I'm glad to hear this is a recurring theme across the various organizations where we're asking all these different questions to. So thank you for sharing. I mean, Damian, maybe I'll ask you a question again. And I think you'll appreciate this, right? given your background especially, that the journey of drug discovery and development is certainly a long and very arduous one. I don't think anyone will disagree with that. What advice would you actually give anyone looking to embark on such a journey, be it the researcher or the downstream players who come into play?
Well, I mean, maybe I'll pick up on your previous point. The first thing to remember is that this is a team sport. The reality of trying to get an idea through to a successful drug is one that requires a lot of fortitude, a lot of real effort, a lot of collaborative effort. I mean, there are various statistics out there. Some say it takes 10,000 ideas to get to one successful drug. It can take 5, 8, 9 years, depending on the nature of the modality. And it can cost anywhere over, $100 million. So I think what we need to recognize is that, this takes a lot of effort and time, and there is high risk. But it's also to recognize that at the end of the day, we must never lose sight of why we do this. The ultimate aim here is to treat patients who are still waiting to have new treatments. And so, the endeavor is not because of itself. It's not just simply to just sort of allow us to just highlight great science. All of these are necessary elements for us to bring new novel drugs to patients. In my lifetime as a physician, I remember as a medical student, a number of cancer types, for example, leukemias in children, melanomas in adults. If they were diagnosed, essentially you were a death sentence.
Death sentence, yeah.
And so what we've seen, though, is that through this endeavors of science, really understanding basic biology, cancer biology, we've completely changed the face of some of these cancer types to where now they are no longer the life threats that they were when first diagnosed. Yeah. So I think that's something we must remember. And so is to keep the faith, keep the course, but also to be constantly critiquing the project. So we must not get into progression-seeking behavior, just keep things going because we can, but rather that we should. So always revisiting, are we still on track? Are we still potentially able to deliver that sort of disruptive treatment for patients? And to be, in a way, our own worst critics, is to really ask the hard questions, because I think only then do we have a greater chance of being successful, is by asking ourselves the hard questions, but also working in these collaborative partnerships with physicians and indeed with patients. I think one of the things we've learned is we often forgot the patient in the conversations about what are necessary for new drugs. Now we much more engage patients. So I think all of these efforts are required for us to be successful. But without us, who would else do it?
Absolutely, absolutely spot on, I think. And just want to echo your comment, I guess, as a practicing clinician myself. I mean, I still do practice medicine. This idea of not forgetting the patient. When we talk about trends, being the ABCs that I've often said, automation, artificial intelligence, big data, and consumerism, or patient centricity, we certainly are seeing in the market, all organizations starting to realize the importance of remembering the patient at the end of it. Because regardless of who we are, as long as we're working in the health industry sector, all of our end users are ultimately patients. So thank you for that message. Hui Ching, maybe I can ask you another question. Given that drug development is a high-risk endeavor, could you share how does that EDDC actually work along with the various stakeholders to strengthen the pipeline of homegrown therapeutics in the local biotech circle?
Yeah, so as Damian alluded to, every step of the drug discovery and development process should be to mitigate the risk so that it warrants the investment that's needed to take the next step and beyond to ultimately make a meaningful difference for patients. And the way EDDC has done it, we work with stakeholders through different partnership models to add value to the pipeline and to mitigate these risks through our technologies and expertise, and we do it at different stages. So as an example, at the early stage within the Target Translation Consortium, TTC, EDDC then works together with public sector partners in a pre-competitive space through this consortium approach to boost Singapore's chances of success in early stage drug discovery. So what we aim to do here is to inform early and inform better to the investigators help them to generate more convincing evidence for whether the target could be considered and should be considered for drug discovery campaign. So really build a strong case for why the target is considered validated, considered to be causative, really important to modulate in terms of treating the disease. And in so doing, by building up this convincing evidence, we can then build a strong case for the subsequent investments. And then in so doing, we build and sustain a steady stream of high quality validated targets from Singapore. So ultimately, what we want to do is to ensure the researchers with completed TGC projects are better positioned for competitive grants, such as STDR, or better positioned for partnerships with industry, or to partner with us, or to create spin-offs. But then they would have gone through this whole process, coming out just with better data package at the end. And then at the next stage, EDDC participates in the STDR review process. So we work with some of the investigators that are funded through the STDR process, and we bring our expertise and our drug platforms to these projects to bridge this drug development gap and to help to create a pool of assets from publicly funded research. And this is done at the different stages. Then at the end, closer to biotech companies, we have different partnership models with biotech companies. These range from very flexible service arrangements to provide access to our drug discovery platform through to very strategic risk reward sharing research collaboration. So ultimately, the goal is again to bridge the drug development gap, to help mitigate risk, to add value to the pipeline. And we do this by bringing our technologies and expertise to the projects. And we are open and flexible in terms of how we develop partnership models. We believe these should be fit for purpose and aimed to create and capture values from the R&D investment that are being made.
Great, thank you. I guess in summary, it sounds just that the answer in short is really a very well-structured approach that has been well thought through. So great, thank you, Hui-Ching. Maybe just to wrap things up, Damian, one final question. If I could just request you to share your view on the trends and challenges ahead for therapeutics and biopharmaceutical development with respect to Singapore specifically.
It's a great question, Zubin. I think maybe let me reflect on a few areas that I think we must understand. I think from the pharma side of things, now there's a kind of open market to potentially great science. The in-house research and development efforts are something of the past more than the present. So open sourcing of this great science, so to speak. And so, but that is occurring everywhere. If we see, for example, the emergence of China and what it's been doing in the last number of years. So what Singapore needs to appreciate, it needs to build on the tremendous investment it has made in the basic sciences, but needs to further invest in the translational elements, to really ensure that, as I say, the great science can be potentially converted to great drugs. So it's really understanding you need a cohort of expertise and knowledge to essentially allow yourself to be competitive in that space. I think the other things that we're seeing is personalized medicine. We have a number of initiatives here in Singapore that is really understanding the personalization of disease and indeed therapeutic responses in diseases. We need to build on that. We have a privilege of having access to patients here across different sort of ethnicities. And so we need to learn from that and really using that as a kind of almost a bench framework for us to really exploit that knowledge and to provide that evidence in a wider scale that really identifies not just within Singapore, but as I mentioned earlier on, the possibilities that there are specific cancer types or other disease phenotypes that are unique to Asia, and we can learn about that here. So we need to do that. I think maybe if the final thing I would mention is the whole area of big data, is actually understanding the data sourcing of coming from wearables, other data sources. Can we exploit that in terms of potential digital therapeutics, or indeed exploit that in the context of real world data to help us understand diseases and or provide bases in which we can understand potentially new targets or new therapeutic approaches that can be leveraged for patients. So I think it's really recognizing the trends, seeing those trends, being ahead of the trends sometimes, really investing sometimes at risk to be ahead of some of those trends and to make ourselves something that, you know, is really a powerhouse at a global level. We do not have a commercial market that will attract the companies, so we need to attract them on the basis of our excellence in these other areas.
Absolutely. You were gonna, when I heard you start there in your response, I was gonna ask you a question, but then you answered it at the end in terms of data. I think everyone is talking about data. You know, in Asia, we've been a bit slow to adopt. In the West, people have got data strategies and have been using data to generate insights and action and then value. And then, you know, that value could be monetary and non-monetary and improve clinical benefits. So I'm glad to hear that that's a focus area and that's what you guys are looking to do as well. So listen, you know, on that note, thank you so much, Damian and Hui Ching, for your time. Really appreciate your insights. I'm sure the audience has appreciated it as well. I wish you all the best and have a good day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Zubin. Thank you very much.
Over the years, Singapore Stanford Biodesign has played an important role in the local medtech ecosystem by nurturing and training the next generation of medical innovators for Singapore and Asia, anchored on biodesign methodology. Locally, SSB has served as a focal point to bring together a multidisciplinary network of clinicians, engineers, and industrial partners. This is through its outreach and initiatives such as the corporate membership, fellowship, and innovation class.
There have been over 500 trainees coming from the Singapore Biodesign program, 28 fellows, over 200 students, and a number of people from the industry and the local medtech scene. So that's the most important legacy. When we look back 10 years from now at what Singapore Biodesign has accomplished, it's going to be this talent pool, this next generation of entrepreneurs who are going to lead health technology innovation in Southeast Asia.
The needs-based approach led us to see end-stage renal disease, one of the most expensive chronic diseases to treat today, being the space that's crying out most for innovations that takes cost out of the system and the treatment procedure. Within the space, the biodesign process was really further used to guide us to identify that vascular access is the strategic problem that is best tackled first in order to unlock how this whole treatment paradigm needs to progress.
I thought that hackathons is one way to actually bring multidisciplinary teams together within healthcare. It was pretty good. We had like 60 people attending it, and then the projects are still ongoing as of now. So it's kind of like a fast way to find solutions.
So in our daily work at Zicom MedTech, we need to be able to, at the get-go, suss out which MedTech startups are worth taking a closer look at and worth investing. So using the biodesign process as a framework, we are able to very consistently and diligently evaluate each MedTech startup that comes our way. We do this in order to identify the true potential of each startup in the future.
The SSB Innovation Class program provides a foundational overview of the MedTech innovation process from a needs-based perspective, which is different from a typical academic module.
The whole entire biodesign process tells you very clearly that what you need to do in order to develop the product itself. And that gives the benefits, because NHIC is not just a GAP funding agency, or it's not just a funding agency itself. Once we fund the project, we still need to actually provide a lot of guidance to make sure that the project gets successful outcome. And with the knowledge of biodesign process, this has helped us a lot when we actually provide that kind of guidance over to the project team members.
Even in Advanced's recent business move in acquiring our US competitor and predicate device, the biodesign process was relevant and in fact used to guide us in this decision making, particularly in how the combined product portfolio can address unmet needs holistically, and how the business development strategy can have synergy with a multi-product approach.
SSB played a very important role in terms of its network. I think when I think about all the important connections that we've made over the years that helped us with fundraising, that's helped us with our regulatory work, somehow, one way or another, these are networks that we built through the Biodesign network, through the SSB network. These are people that we met through SSB.
Outside of Singapore, we continue to extend our outreach into regional countries and have over 10 immersion and academic partners in the regions such as Indonesia, China, Korea, and Malaysia. These outreach provides a platform for the program to bring biodesign know-how to our partners, as to enable greater synergistic collaboration towards a better understanding of the region's needs to develop country-specific products. As Singapore Stanford Biodesign evolves to Singapore Biodesign, there will be a larger emphasis on Asia as the program looks to build upon its strong Asian partnership networks to better uncover needs across the innovation value chain. This will provide a more Asian-centric curriculum to plug the implementation gaps and accelerate projects towards commercialization.
Hi, this is Mary from the Singapore Biodesign Program. Today I'm here to present to you more about what we do. So Singapore Biodesign is Singapore's talent development platform for health tech innovation. And our mission is really to accelerate the health technology innovations towards commercialization and adoption through the biodesign need-centric approach. We are a national platform funded by the National Research Foundation, and we are jointly administered by the Agency for Science, Technology and Research, Singapore A*STAR, and with our Stanford Biocentre for Biodesign as our program partner. So SB has traditionally been involved with teaching programs for health tech innovation. And really in the next 5 years to come, we are focusing our efforts on broadening the outreach to more people in the translational project space. And this involves training entities from light touch to high touch offerings. So if you look at this screen here, we provide open access lectures to the open public. We provide bite-sized workshops, which will be SkillsFuture accredited next year, offered through the Duke NUHS umbrella. And we also do customized workshops that we focus on specific needs to uncover good project proposals. And we also then focus very much on the faculty fellowship and the innovation fellowship, which is our flagship offering, both a part-time and a full-time program that brings the fellows through the whole needs finding process, invention, and implement phase of the biodesign process. Finally, we work with our network partners to provide one-to-one expert consultations. And this not only involves people from Singapore, but also in regions from China and the US. Finally, we feel that it's important to provide one-to-one high-touch mentoring for high-value projects, and this is where we do a bit of consultancy and incubation together with our partners. So altogether, the biodesign methodology is a needs-driven process that brings you through the identify phase, invent phase, and then the implement phase, so as to accelerate your health technology innovations towards markets. And increasingly, Singapore Biodesign is focused on being agent-centric and also being implementation-centric, so that innovators can know of the challenges right up front from the start to inform their innovations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for a great overview of Singapore Biodesign. So maybe I can just start by asking you a question or two. Singapore Biodesign, formerly known as Singapore Stanford Biodesign, was established a decade ago or thereabouts and provides health tech innovation training in various forms, as you just shared in your presentation. How has the health tech ecosystem in Singapore changed from a decade ago, in your opinion?
Yeah, so maybe I can share more about this and how it has evolved. So SSB was started by a group of medtech advocates and visionaries who saw the need to bring good practices in medtech innovation to Singapore. At that time, there was a lot of interest from the IHLs and the hospitals to solve healthcare problems, but really they lacked the robust frameworks and supporting grant schemes for translation. So with this, aside from SSB as a talent training program, Prof. Tan Zui, who was then the Director of Health and Lifestyle at A-STAR, he also seeded a number of corresponding initiatives such as the CIVIT program, as well as the MedTech-centric bioengineering grant to support early projects. And that was very instrumental in bringing up the first wave of MedTech projects in Singapore. And together with subsequent grant funding schemes from the NHIC and ESG, there was a lot of rigor that was brought into these project teams and driving home the importance of innovating for an unmet clinical need. Now, so most people already know about the identify phase and finding an unmet clinical need. But as we went along with these projects, we realized that there was not enough know-how in productization. And so many startups struggled with trying to productize and adopt QMS and ISO practices. ESG has actually put in more schemes for MedTech-centric incubators, right? And so with these initiatives, actually the number of health and biomedical startups in Singapore actually tripled from 2014 to 2019. But despite that, I think there still remains the last part of what we call the biodesign process, the implementation part, right? Where there are certain hurdles that, from the external environment, such as raising private capital. We also need to strengthen our proposals such that we become more competitive. But also in Singapore, I think there was maybe not enough clinical trials or research that was being done for such innovative products, and also a lack of awareness for country-specific regulatory and reimbursement frameworks. 2020 has been an exceptional year for MedTech and health tech innovation for Singapore, actually. If you look at COVID-19 and how it's accelerated the pace of technology development, productization of homegrown innovations, it really showed the might of our clinical, technical, and industry stakeholders to come together, to work together to do the end-to-end innovation. And so I think this provides the landscape for a very exciting future for us in Singapore.
Certainly, I think so, I agree. If I asked you, in your experience, what would you say are the key differences really in the health tech ecosystem, just generally as a whole, between Stanford and Singapore?
Yeah, so I think there are both differences and similarities. And really, when we first started Singapore Stanford Biodesign in Singapore, there was a hope that we would be able to get to the same standard as in Stanford and the Bay Area. But obviously, there are key differences that has prevented that from happening. Stanford's ecosystem has at least a 30-year head start on Singapore, really. The Bay Area thrives because they feed each other, right? So you have this healthy pipeline of health tech innovations coming out from the universities, right? Adequate private funding, and willing MNCs there, right? So the MNCs, most of them are headquartered there, or they have decision-making powers there. And so they are willing to acquire, market, and adopt these technologies. And because they benefit each other, the industry also in turn then comes back to nurture and mentor the innovators right from the onset. And this really keeps the cycle going. And also in the US, you will see that they have a very established FDA regulatory authority, and that really sets the standard for healthcare product registrations. And so these innovators, they have to conform and adopt the best practices to get their products into market, and which is why we see many first-in-class products in the US. And so in Singapore, on the other hand, while we lack the natural advantages of the Bay Area, I think our government has recognized these factors such as small market size, maybe not as much experienced talent, lower risk appetite by our own locals, right? And so we have taken on a very national approach to developing schemes to encourage innovation and to provide assistance to overcoming some of these barriers. So for example, Singapore Biodesign, NHIC, and DXD Hub are just some of the examples of nationally funded programs that play important roles to kickstart this innovation. And of course, I think with the maturing of the ecosystem, we really want to see more industry veterans coming back to help and commercialize this technology. So we have more EIRs coming out from the industry, and also a lot of industry support now. And of course, the uniqueness of Singapore is really the Asian population, or the access to the Asian population, and also the chance to look at value-based healthcare offerings for the region, which I think we may have the more insight than the US does.
Thanks, Mary. Very, very comprehensive and well articulated response. If I moved on and asked you that, over the last decade, just specifically with Singapore Biodesign, I believe outcomes have included 23 funded projects, 10 spin-offs with 2 technologies reaching patients. Could you share a little more about the 2 technologies that reached patients and actually what differentiated them from those that did not?
Yeah, so maybe I can qualify this a little bit more. So SSB was used to be focused on medical devices, and we used to teach that. Of course, that has already evolved into health technology, and you can't get away from digital health. And in fact, some of these digital device drug kind of combinations. But what we meant by reaching patients is that at least the medical device products that have been developed by our alumni has been successfully trialed in patients for safety and efficacy, right? But there's still that little bit that they are short of, which is market distribution. And it does take a long time for medical devices to reach market. And in Singapore, it probably takes 1 or 2 years more than the US to get there. So we've only had a 10-year history, of which maybe grant funding schemes kicked in about 5 years ago. So I think we are just about there where we're going to see more and more innovations reach market. So if you look at the 2 technologies from our alumni that came up directly from our program, this is really Advanced Access and PrivX Medical. So Advanced Access was founded by our ex-program director, Mr. Pei Rui Fong. And when Advanced Access was able to successfully complete clinical trials in both Singapore and New Zealand and has submitted the application for CE marking. And this is quite incredible because it is actually a Class 2B implantable vascular access device. Actually, not many people in Singapore actually go towards implantables. So we find that this was really one that with the biodesign process was able to help it along the way to get there. PrivX Medical was founded by Mr. Prusofman Sinaraja, together with the rest of our 2014 Innovation Fellowship team. And this product has received FDA 510K clearance in 2019, and we have completed a 200-patient trial in China for this drug-free hemorrhoid treatment. So what are the ingredients that makes them successful, at least to this stage, right? We felt that both technologies benefited from identifying an important unmet clinical need right up from the onset. And with the biodesign process, we were able to at least think out the 2 to 3 year implementation plan. And this was important for them to raise funds, right, to provide a good pitch deck to the investors. But also in terms of taking the steps forward in execution, they were able to already envision what they needed to do and then be able to prepare for the challenges ahead. So I think both founders were well informed and prepared and able to carry the weight of the company in its early days.
Thank you for giving those insights. I think very, very useful to the audience who are listening in to help them determine what are those key success factors. I think would like to also reiterate one of the points that you mentioned, identification of the right problem. In the market, we see that often as one of the biggest challenges. Companies don't take the time and speak to the right people to actually understand if they've identified the right problem, and if they have, whether that solution is actually the right one. So very insightful. Thank you, Mary. Maybe ask you something a little bit about the actual design thinking process. So of the 7 steps in the design thinking process, from empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, regulatory, and reimbursement, where do you find people stumbling the most? And why do you think this is the case?
Well, this design thinking process for health tech innovation is actually an iterative process. So you can actually start from any step and try and retrace back and use that to inform the other steps. But really, I think the first step, which is empathy, is always the hardest. And this really is the identify phase in biodesign that we emphasize a lot. So some solutions, if you look at it, they often take on this, what we call the tech push, right? But if you're trying to apply a tech push solution into an application such as a healthcare setting where you have so many multiple stakeholders and users, actually you always have to then figure out what the user wants and then try and tailor that technology to it. So it's actually where you start and where you end. But we felt that there's a need to start early, right? So to identify and address these problems from the onset. And empathizing is not always easy in a healthcare setting. And, you know, sometimes we try and do interviews with certain users, but of course, some of them may skew us or the innovators in the wrong direction because they're so passionate about a certain area, but it could also be a problem that they face only and not the rest of their colleagues. So it's very important to get the experience, but to get a lot of it, which is why we encourage our fellows to do immersion. It's not just go in for half a day, but we actually go in for sometimes even up to 2 months, right? And after the first 2 weeks, we'll be like, oh, this is repetitive. I don't need to be here anymore. But then the next thing you know, some complication happens, and this is a complication that maybe happens, has a 5% or 10% complication rate, right? And you actually observe it and you realize that the response is probably non-ideal. And so this provides the setting for you to start thinking about how you want to innovate around a solution. So again, I think this is where we would like to encourage all innovators to try and think about the need in advance from the user perspective and empathize with the user. And so you can mitigate this risk of adoption later on.
That's great. In medical school, or when we speak to our medical students, we always say how compassion and empathy are important. I guess you're absolutely right in the health tech space as well, to the companies out there, to be able to empathize, extremely just as important, if not more. So I think moving on, if I looked at your website, when I did look at your website, I noted a number of testimonials from individuals who have undergone your various programs that you briefly touched on. So in your opinion, what would you say is the greatest value your different programs provide individuals, and how do you actually go about providing it?
Yeah, maybe I set the context first. So Biodesign teaches multidisciplinary teams. So different people come to us for different objectives, and employers send their employees also for different objectives. And so the value to each is usually, we try to tailor it, but we also try and make it a bit more universal across. In my opinion, as an alumni of the program myself, the greatest value is the Biodesign framework. It has been an extremely robust methodology that I've used not only in medtech innovations, but also for high-level strategy scoping. It's so important to engage stakeholders, to understand their point of view, and then looking at industry trends and trying to set certain directions. So these are all in line with the Biodesign methodology. And also, if you look at Biodesign methodology, it used to be very medical device-centric, but increasingly, it can be also applied across many different healthcare sectors and domains. So it can be applied not just in the clinical setting, the hospital setting, but you can bring it out into the home setting and apply that, right? Also, in terms of other domains, even in digital health now, right, where actually the usability is so much more important, that really, we felt that it is really one of the key aspects to applying such a technology. But from the other alumni, maybe if I speak for them, actually the other thing that really comes up is the network as well. I think they really appreciate the local and international network that can be forged through the Biodesign community. And also because after going through the Biodesign program, it really forms the common language that bonds the innovators from the clinical, academia, and industry sectors, both in Singapore and outside Singapore. So I do feel that the value is multiple-fold. And I myself am very indebted to this program and very grateful for it. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe just to wrap things up, one last question. Obtaining unmet clinical needs is really one of the most important steps in product innovation. We talked about that just now earlier on, right, in one of the earlier questions. Could you provide maybe some tips to the aspiring innovators out there on how they can actually achieve this?
Yeah. So I think we cannot emphasize enough that you need to uncover the unmet clinical need, and this is not a literature exercise, right? So we time and again, I mean, the value of the fellowship that we have, the full-time fellowship, is that we provide this emergent environment where we try and engineer our fellows to go into the clinical environments, not just in Singapore, but also all across the world, right? In China, Indonesia, and the US, because we believe that you need to identify how the workflow is in the different countries and how the same disease is treated in different countries. So it's really then after you have had that exposure, as you're building your innovations, to then establish a clinical KOL or clinical collaborator so that you can continually get this access and also have that feedback going with your clinical collaborator. So these are some of the tips that we have. And of course, I think last but not least, you can also approach enablers in the ecosystem like us, NHIC, and all the innovation centers of the healthcare clusters. I think Singapore has really established itself in the recent years. The innovation centers for healthcare clusters has also really been developed and established. And so this is where I think you could possibly find contacts and inroads inside.
Definitely. Thank you for that. I agree. We have definitely established ourselves as Singapore. I'd like to think so too. So I guess to answer the question, as Mary said, you can phone a friend or you can go through the likes of the Singapore Biodesign program, but make sure you get that exposure. Very, very important, and especially take into consideration the cultural nuances that exist in clinical practices in various countries and geography. So listen, on that note, thank you so much for your time today, Mary. Really appreciate it. It's been a very insightful session. Thanks for sharing about Singapore Biodesign and some tips and tricks to all the innovators out there. Thanks for your time, and I wish you all the best and have a very good afternoon ahead.
Yeah, thanks Zubin, and thanks NHIC. Thank you.
Catalyst essentially is a wonderful collaboration between Padang & Co. and Aardvark Labs, Dr. Reina Damuan, Lai Kawing, and me. Together, we are creating a space which is not just a co-working space, but a center for innovation in the medical technology field, the first in Singapore that has strong strategic collaborations with industry, institutions, and clinicians in virtually any specialty or area.
So this is actually a unique space because this is really created from a ground-up perspective, which is what innovation is all about, right? It's all about ground-up work.
So the vision of Catalyst is to really try to bring startups who are doing medtech, health tech, healthcare-related projects that are trying to solve real unmet clinical problems together to try to bring their product to market and hopefully value add to their healthcare system. So what we want to do is really bring all the medtech and health tech startups all over Singapore and the region to in one space so that they can actually meet and hopefully collaborate.
We are not just a co-working space. We are a vibrant activity center trying to help develop the medtech ecosystem in Singapore.
The vision is that this ecosystem will have outcomes that include creating startups that's going to be successful in creating products that's going to help change the world.
Now, I also envision that these startups gain attention not just in Singapore, but are also beneficial for the health and care of ASEAN and for the rest of the world.
So I hope everyone has found these sessions with our various panelists insightful and have taken some good takeaway home messages. We thank all our panelists for their time. NHIC, thank you so much for hosting this session. I think it's been very informative. I wish everyone a great week ahead at Switch, and all the best to all of you. Have a good day.
In less than 50 years, Singapore transformed itself from a developing country to a thriving global economy. With people as Singapore's most valuable resource, its leadership recognized early on that developing its science and technology capabilities will not only deliver health, but also wealth.
Singapore's quest to be a medical innovation and enterprise hub has been relentless. The country's latest roadmap for technology and science development includes a record $14 billion. The goal is simple: research, innovate, and commercialize.
Singapore's National Eye Centre has been at the cutting edge of the Lion State's strategy to turn its researchers into global entrepreneurs. Its medical director received more than $180,000 from the National Health Innovation Centre to develop a tool that detects diabetic complications affecting the eyes. Called Selena, it has been adopted in Singapore and distributed across Europe and Asia Pacific since March this year.
As a clinician,
I really have no idea how to commercialize our research. So NHIC helped us by firstly looking at market feasibility, a business plan, and gave us project managers to move a research product into much more later stage commercialization. So for example, Selena is now licensed to a major MNC which will take the product globally in different markets.
Singapore is pushing hard to strengthen innovation and enterprise in the country's healthcare community. The NHIC, a government-supported agency, provides clinical researchers with translational funding to boost the healthcare sector. The agency's executive director says for Singapore's economy to thrive, innovators have to become part of the country's economic system.
We are identifying key projects which have, number one, commercial value, has relevant, important changes that can be improving on healthcare adoption, making things more faster, more efficient, cheaper. This is the way healthcare is going now.
So what are the different roles NHIC is fulfilling?
Our national mandate is to really make sure Singapore is up there in terms of innovation on the global platform for innovation. And obviously we want to have an economic benefit to the country, and innovation will always bring in new jobs, create new ideas on thinking, create new policies, new protocols, and bring in the expertise and talent necessary. So I think innovation and economy building comes in hand in hand.
The NHIC receives about 60 applicants every year. 70% are for tech-related innovations. The rest are in the biopharma space. Competition for the funding is stiff. The agency carefully selects projects for the global market. The clinicians applying for the agency's help have to meet 3 important criteria.
One is a validated clinical unmet needs. Second thing here is that it has to be a sizable, addressable market. And the third one, it has to be a passionate and dedicated project team that will help you to see through the whole entire project. Once it has been funded by NHIC, we will have project managers to guide the clinicians to develop this project. We will look into things like regulatory for them, reimbursement, and we will even also look into the business model of the projects that they wanted to develop through commercialization.
Thanks to medical advances and a highly accessible healthcare system, Singaporeans are living longer lives. In fact, the 3rd longest in the world.
But the island also has a very low birth rate and one of the most rapidly aging populations in Asia. Heart diseases are on the rise, so implant technology may just be the answer to meet the growing demand for heart care.
Professor Theo Kofidis and his team received around $1 million to develop a human-like heart valve. The so-called SingValve's first prototype is expected to hit the markets in 2023.
Our valve is not off the shelf. We are taking the patient's pre-operative data. As usual, no special scan or anything like that. As the usual pre-operative scans we do in every patient. And we use a special algorithm developed in our lab to then produce a valve that is personalized, is individualized for the recipient. The valve is then produced within the time of 2 days, sterilized, packaged, and sent to the hospital where the operation is to be carried out.
Personalized or not, it's clear the public sector will continue to play a critical role in Singapore's innovation success story. As for the future, the NHIC has big ambitions.
I want NHIC to be a household name, the go-to name, not just in Singapore, but in Asia and beyond.